I'm
missing my coffee, but that's okay.
Hi,
All right, Challah. We have Dalid. Hey,
Dalet Vav.
Dalid Vav. I'm sorry. One may take this challah quantity from dough from which challah had not been yet separated, to make it in a state of cleanliness in order to go on separating it from challah of demai until it rots. For challah of demai may be taken from the clean to the unclean and from that which is not nearby. If Jews were a reason of non-Jews in Syria, Reb Eliezer declares their produce liable to Masurus until the laws of the seventh year, but Rabbi Gamil exempts. Rabbi Gamil says two challah in Syria, but Reb Eliezer says one challah. They adopted the lenient ruling of the Rabbi Gamil and the lenient ruling of Rabbi Eliezer. They retracted in following the ruling of Rabbi Gamil in respect to both. Rabbi Gamil says there are three lands regarding challah. From Eretz Yisrael to Kizev, one challah. From Kizev up to the river and up to the Amana, two challahs. One for the fire and one for the priest. The one for the fire has a measure, but the one for the priest has no measure. From the river and Amama and inward, two challahs. One for the fire, one for the priest. The one for the fire has no measure, but the one for the priest has a measure, and the Tivul Yom may eat it. Rabbi Yossi says he does not require immersion, and it is forbidden to zavam and to zavot, nida, and women after childbirth. But it may be eaten at a table with a non-priest and may be given to any priest.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, since we're on the subject of things that can be given to any priest, um, right? And normally there are a lot of things that we're careful about which priest we give to, because of dinim of tuma and tara. So we want to make sure that we give it to a kohen chaver. But
Right.
here, the following things can be given to any priest, even in Amaretz. Okay, a charamim. So what's a cherem? That's a neches. That's a property. So when if somebody declares his property to be cherem to Hashem, and if it hits the end of the if it's in an open city, then it comes until the Yovel. Um, and if it hasn't been redeemed by the Yovel, then it goes into the property of the coin.
Uh-huh.
It can be any coin. It doesn't have to be. It could be an amaretz even. Bechoros, also bechor, because um, so the bechor we know has to be given to a kohen. So we think, okay, so he's going to have to take it up to the mizbech. Then aren't we worried about tum and tara? Well, yes, actually, we are, but we also have a principle that amei haaretz are careful about tum and tara when it comes to the mikdash. So we're not too concerned that there's going to be any issues with kodshim.
Right.
Even a kohen amaretz is trustworthy there. Pidyon ben can be any kohen who does the redemption of a firstborn. Pidyon petach hamor, and the firstborn of a donkey. Also, it can be any kohen. Hazra lechaim vakeva. Those are the parts that are given from any chulin animal that's shechted that has to be given to a kohen. Okay, and they're chulin, so there's no particular din of that of tumotara that we have to be concerned about. Reishis hagez. Remember, we said that the from the wolf, when you shear your sheep, you have to give a portion to the kohen. Can be any kohen. Shem and streifa. If you have truma oil that became tame, so there you can give it even to an Amaretz kohen because it's already tame, and he knows it's tame, and he knows that he has to burn it. So there's no concern there. Kodsham mikdash, anything that has to do with kodshim that are going to the mikdash, you can be given to any kohen because even Amaretz, as we said before, are particular about Tumah and Tara when it comes to the mikdash, and bikurim. And Bikurim, even though they're not normal things they're not called Kodesh Hamikdash, but they are nonetheless Kadosh in that respect, and we don't have to worry about the Bikurim. Except Rabbi Yehuda says no. Bikurim I'm concerned about because they don't treat it with the same sort of um, respect as they do with the other Kodshim. So therefore, you shouldn't give Bikurim to a Kohen Amaretz. Karshine truma. What about vetches? Vetches, those are the things that are normally animal fodder, but in a pinch are eaten by humans. Rabbi Akiva matir v'chachamim osrin. So he says, give it to any coin. It doesn't matter because in any case he's going. As we saw in Masasheni, he says you can do all of the preparation of vetches in Tuma because it's going to be fed to the animals anyway. But Chachamim say it's also to give it to just any coin because sometimes if people are really hungry, they'll eat them themselves. And if it's truma, the coin Amaretz is going to be nechshal.
Right. Okay.
All right.
Right.
Mishnah Yud. Nitai ish tekoa hebi chalos me beitar. Okay. Or beitor, more likely. So some people say this is not the beitar that we know that's in the gush.
Right.
Okay. This is a town that's in Chutz La'aretz, and that's why we have the question, because he's bringing a challah from Chutz La'aretz into Eretz Yisrael. Because you're not okay, and lo kiblu mimenu, and they wouldn't accept this challah from him. Why? Because it's also to bring challah from Chutz La'aretz into Eretz Yisrael, just because it just the same way as you don't bring truma from there. Okay, the concern, of course, being that it's you have tumas Chutz La'aretz, and you're bringing it into Eretz Yisrael, and now it's now you're worried about a coin actually eating this tamei truma. Thinking that it's Tower. Okay. Anshe Alexandria, so people of Alexandria in Mitzrayim, Heviu Chalasein me Alexandria v'lo kiblu mehem, and the same thing happened with them. They also brought challah from Yerushalayim to from Alexandria to Eretz Yisrael, and they said, and again the Yerushalmi explains on both these cases. That people shouldn't say, oh, we saw that truma tamei was brought in and eaten, because it's tamei because of tumas Chutz La'aretz. Okay, but to burn them, okay, so maybe you have to burn it. No, you can't do it. Tumas eretz ha'amim yedua. It's not a well-known thing that the tuma of that the produce of Chutz La'aretz is automatically tamei, and there's a chashash that people are going to say, oh, we saw truma tahora being burned.
Right.
So whatever you do, you're going to get messed up, and to send it back, you can't do that either. Truma yotzeis me Eretz Yisrael, the Chutz La'aretz. We saw truma being taken out of Eretz Yisrael. Okay, so whatever you do, you're in a bind. So therefore, they leave it up to when they brought it in. They said leave it up until Erev Pesach and let it be burned with the chametz, because then even regular truma would be burned on Erev Pesach. Another maaseh. Anshe ha'tzavoim heviu bikurim kodim latzeres. So they brought bikurim before Shavuos. Now Shavuos is the start of the bikurim season. You're not supposed to bring before Shavuos. Okay. V'lo kiblu mehem, and they didn't accept it. Okay. Okay. In other words, they sent them home. Said, come back after Shavuos. Because it says that Shavuos is the harvesting festival. That's when you start bringing bikurim. Okay. Now, say there's some commentary on this. So, and these bikurim are they're matir all of they matir the new grain in the mikdash. Up until now, new grain was permitted out from the first day Chol HaMoed of Pesach. The chadash was mutar outside the mikdash, but the korban of the shtei alechem on Shavuos permits the new grain to be used for korbanos inside the mikdash as well.
Mm-hmm.
Now, hang on, was there a reason why they brought it? Now, the Yerushalmi has a kasha on this. It says in Maseches Menachos that if somebody brings bikurim before the shtei alechem, it's kasher. And so what's the answer? Why did they turn away these people? Because it's a davar mesuyam shelo yikavah davar kova, that people shouldn't see, oh wait, people are bringing their bikurim before Shavuos on a regular basis, because they were important people. Anshe hartzevoim anshe hayu anashim gedolim yismuchu aleihem. If they'd seen these prominent people coming and bringing bikurim so early in the season, people would say, this is the time to start bringing bikurim, and they didn't want that. So therefore, they turned them away. Okay, and now the final Mishnah of our Masechta. Ben Antinus he'ela bechoros mi Bavel, v'lo kiblu mimenu. Okay, so he's so also he brought a bechor from Chutz La'aretz to Eretz Yisrael, and they didn't accept it from him. Why? Because the pasuk says that you must eat it in the place that Hashem chose, right? So the drasha is that only from the place that you can bring Maser Dagan can you bring Bechoros. So Bechoros is not noeg in Chutz La'aretz, in other words. Okay, and therefore you can't. They say you can't bring it else a Bechor. You can bring it. You want to bring it to the Shlamim? Okay, that's nice, but it's not a Bechor. Yosef HaKohen hevi bikore yain v'shemen lemikdash v'lo kiblu mimenu. He brought his bikurim in the form of wine and of oil. Now remember, we've had this discussion about wine and oil. They're the only things that are actually considered better than the original fruit. So we said that if you take truma, you can take truma from the finished product rather. It's better to take it from the wine and from the oil than from the original grapes or olives.
Right.
And if you want to do Maaser Sheni, if you want to bring Maaser Sheni, you can convert those things. You can squeeze the grapes of Maaser Sheni and make them into wine of Maaser Sheni, which is great, which you can't do with other fruits. Right? Maaser Sheni oranges, you can't squeeze into orange juice. You've got to enjoy them in their original state, which is considered more important. So Yosef HaKohen says this is a great idea. So why don't I do the same thing with bikurim? Okay. Because bikurim has a specific din that you have to bring it in the original fruit. Okay. So we learned in Truma. Now in Maseches Trumas, Kahati points out in the commentary here. Ein mevi'in bikurim mashkin ela hayotze min hazeisim u'min ha'anavim. Okay, so we actually had a Mishnah that seems to contradict this. Muvar Yerushalmi explains, Yerushalmi Shemud Devar Sham kishebatzru mitchila es ha'anavim lasos mehem yayin ve'es hazeisim lasos mehem yayin. Because when he originally picked them, he had in mind to bring them as wine or as oil. He just picked them as grapes or as olives, as the bikurim, and then he changed his mind and decided to bring them as wine or as oil, and therefore they didn't accept from him the bikurim like this. Rambam actually differs from this explanation. He has a different explanation. He says that we actually have a machlokes tanaim between the two Mishnas. That our Mishnah is actually disagreeing with the Mishnah in Maseches Trumas and says that you can't bring wine or grape or wine or oil to the Mikdash as bikurim, and he paskins the halacha like our Mishnah. Okay, so continuing on with Yosef HaKohen, he also what did he also do? Afu he'elayes banav es b'nei beiso la'asos Pesach katan b'Yerushalayim. So he brought all of his family to do Pesach Katan. What's Pesach? It's Pesach Sheni. Okay. Why did they send him back? So that it shouldn't be fixed as an obligation on people. Now, what does that mean? So we're going to have to look into the parish to understand what happened here. He brought his little children with him, so that they could come and keep he's doing chinuch. He wants his children to come and do the do the re'iyah in Yerushalayim. There's only the mitzvah for them is only in Pesach Rishon. Therefore, that's why they sent him back. So here we learn another interesting halacha about Pesach Sheni, that if you aren't able to come for Pesach Rishon because you're tamei, and you want to come for Pesach Sheni, don't bring the little kids. It's only the adults who chayav in the Korban Pesach who you must bring the little kids. But for Pesach Rishon, you do bring the kids because it's chinuch for them all to come. Okay. Yesh mefarshim. That's the explanation of Rambam and the Bartanura. Yesh mefarshim shehe'ela is ishto lasos Pesach Sheni, that he also brought his wife to bring the Pesach Sheni. כלומר, לשחוט עליה את קורבן פסח, שסבור היה שאף הנשים חייבות לעשות פסח שני. He thought that also women have to bring פסח שני, and they sent him back why? שלדעתם נשים בפסח שני רשוס, that they have no obligation to bring it because this has now fallen back into the geder of mitzvahs aseh shezman grama. Whereas
right.
Pesach Rishon, they have a chiyuv because we have all these drashas that whoever's chayav in chametz is also chayav for matzah, and therefore once you got that, you also have, and everyone has got to eat the korban pesach, but the pesach sheni apparently they held was not. I'm not sure actually what the halacha is. I would have guessed that women are also chayav in Pesach Sheni, just because if they're chayav in Pesach Rishon, they should be chayav in Pesach Sheni. But at any rate, that's the opinion. That's the opinion of Rash. That's how he interprets it. So we got two different ways of understanding what it was that he did wrong, because it's not laid out clearly in the Mishnah. It just says that he came with his family.
Well, if he was tummy, he couldn't observe, a basic Rishon. Then he would have to. His wife wouldn't be observing it either. Then it would be the whole family.
And look, if he was tameh and his wife was tahor, his wife would still have an obligation to come to Yerushalayim to do the korban pesach.
Right.
Because women are just as obligated in korban pesach as men are. Okay, Ariston, heavy bikurav me'apamia. So Ariston, let's just see. He doesn't say who he is.
No.
Okay, he was a personality of some sort. Okay, he brought bikurim from Apamia, which is in Syria. The kiblu mimenu, but they did accept from him because he was a landowner. And in Syria, we said that it takes on the dinim of Eretz Yisrael. Interesting. Okay, that they accepted it, even though it's kind of in Eretz Amim. But sorry, we added these things. Inyan Bikurim, it's like Eretz Israel. For Truma, however, the halacha is that also Syria is considered Chutz La'aretz, and you're not allowed to bring Truma from Syria into Eretz Israel. We learned this in Masechah Shvius. Right. Okay. So what's the difference? Yerushalmi says that Truma we have a chashash because maybe the Kohanim will go and chase after let's say there's a shortage of truma in Eretz Yisrael, and they say, oh, we hear that there's lots of truma in Syria, and now the Kohanim are going to leave Eretz Yisrael to go to Syria. So therefore, we don't want to allow truma to be brought from Syria into Eretz Yisrael. So Chazal enacted this. But when it comes to the Bikurim, there's no reason to have a chashash because the Baalim have to bring it to Yerushalayim. So there's no chashash that the Kohanim are going to go chasing after it. It's going to come to them. Okay, so therefore there was no reason to be gozer on the Bikurim from Syria. The Hadran Alach Maseches Challah.
Okay, we're going to a new Masechta after.
We're going to Orla tomorrow.
Well, that's what I thought. Okay.
Okay.
We have Challah, the base Gimel.
Yeah.
A woman may sit and cut off Challah while she is naked because she can cover herself, but not a man. If one cannot make his dough in a state of cleanliness, let him make it in calves, but let him not make it while unclean. Rabbi Akiva says, let him make it while unclean, but not let him make it in calves. For he designates by name the clean, so he designate by name the unclean. He designates this as Challah, and he designates this as Challah, and calves have no part in the name. If he makes his dough and calves and they touch one another, they are exempt from Challah unless they interlock. Reb Eliezer says even if he withdraws and places into a basket, the basket combines them for Challah. If one separates challah from flour, but if one separates challah from flour, it is not challah, and it counts as it misappropriated in the hand of the priest. The dough itself is liable to challah, and the flour, if it is of quantity, it is liable to challah, and is forbidden to non-priest. So says Rebbe Shua, they said to him, it once happened that an elder non-priest seized it, and he said to them, indeed, it harmed himself, but benefited others.
He took a bullet for the rest of the team, basically. Okay, Mastros, Gimel.
If one hires a laborer to tend olives, and he said to him, on condition that I may eat olives, if he eats one by one, he is exempt, but if he combined, he is liable. To weed out onions, and he said to them, on condition that I may eat greens, and he may pluck them leaf by leaf and eat, but if he combines, he is liable. If one found out cut dried figs on the road, and even beside a field of dried figs, so too, if he found figs under a fig tree overhanging the road, they are permitted and do not constitute theft, and are exempt from miseries. But olives and carobs are liable. If he found dried figs from then, if most people have already pressed their figs, he is liable. But if not, he is exempt. If he found slices of fig cakes, he is liable, since they are evidently derived from a finished product. If carobs have not yet been taken to the rooftop, he may take some down for the cattle, and is exempt since he returns the remainder. I'm surprised that says carob, because if the figs are more chashiv than a carob.
Right, but what's the difference between figs and carobs? That when figs fall on the ground, they go splat.
Right.
So when a fig falls on the ground, the owner's already mityayesh. He's not interested. He doesn't. So if somebody is so desperate that they want to pick up a fig from the ground, they can take it. It's hefker because the
Right.
owner's already been. Owner already doesn't care, doesn't want it. Carobs, however, they fall on the ground. They're still fine. Wipe them off and they're good.
Right. Okay. Was that three?
No, one
No.
more. Hey,
One more. Where am I here? Okay. What courtyard rent is liable to maestros? Rabbi Yishmael says a tyrant yard where goods are under guard. Rabbi Akiva says anyone which person. Wait, since I just got up. Any which one person opens and the other closes is exempt. But Nehemiah says anywhere a person is not shy to eat renders liable. Rabbi Yossi says anywhere if one enters and no one says to him, "What do you seek?" is exempt. Rabbi Yehuda says if there are two courtyards, one within the other, the inner one is liable and the outer one is exempt. Okay.
okay.
Okay, we have Chalayim. Beit Zion.
That's fine. Yeah.
If the point of If a point of a wheat field entered into one of barley, it is permitted, because it is evidently the end of his field. If his is wheat and his neighbor's is another species, he is permitted to plant close to it of the same species. If his is wheat and his neighbor's is wheat, he is permitted to plant close to it a bed of flax, but not a bed of another species. Reb Shimon says especially linseed or any other species. Reb Yossi says even in the center of his field, it is permitted to test with a furrow of flax. And one may not plant close to a grain field, mustard, or safflower, but one may plant close to a vegetable field, mustard, or safflower. And one may plant close to a fallow field, or a plow field, to a stone field, to a fence, or a fence which is 10 tefachim high, to a ditch which is 10 deep and 4 wide, to a tree which overshadows the ground, and to a rock 10 high and 4 wide. If one wishes to lay out his field in patches of differing species, he may make 24 patches to a bet tsar, and each patch one bet rova, and sow in it any species he wishes. If there were one or two patches, he may sow them with mustard. 3, he may not sow them with mustard because it looks like a mustard field. So Reb Meir. But the Chachamim say 9 patches are permitted, 10 are forbidden. Reb Eliezer ben Yaakov says even if all his field is a bet core, he may not make it in more than one patch.
Atkan. Nagayim. Yud Gimel Tes.
Okay, if someone enters an afflicted house with his garments on his shoulder and his sandals and rings in his hands, he and they become tummy immediately. However, if he is wearing his garments, his sandals are on his feet, and his rings are on his fingers, he becomes tummy immediately. But the garments, sandals, and rings remain tahor until he saves enough time to eat a half loaf of wheat bread, rather than barley bread, while reclining and eating with a condiment. Someone stood inside an afflicted house and extended his hand outside with his rings on his fingers. If he remained long enough to eat a half loaf, the rings become tameh. Someone was standing outside and extended his hand inside an afflicted house with his rings on his fingers. Rabbi Yehuda renders him tummy immediately, but they could come and say, until he remains long enough to eat a half loaf. They said to Rabbi Yehuda, when his entire body becomes tummy, his clothes do not become tummy until he remains in the house long enough to eat a half loaf. Is it not logical that when he himself does not become tummy, his clothes should not become tummy either until he remains in the house long enough to eat a half loaf? If a Mitzvah enters the house, all the utensils that are there become tummy, even up to the ceiling beams. Reb Shimon says to the height of 4 cubits. The utensils become tummy immediately, and Rabbi Yehuda says if he remained long enough to kindle a lamp.
So
Okay.
this is another good reason why the Matzorah has to leave the camp, because everywhere he goes, he just spreads tumah.
Right, doesn't matter, right?
Okay,
Wait,
Horios,
hurry up.
Aleph base.
Please. If the courts ruled and realized that they had erred and retracted their ruling whether they had already brought their atonement or whether they did not bring their atonement, and he proceeded to act on their word, Reb Shimon exempts him. But Reb Eliezer says it is doubtful. Which case is doubtful? If he remained at home, he is liable. If he went overseas, he is exempt. Rabbi Akiva, Rabbi Akiva, I
So
agree in
what does this mean? Is that if he was going overseas, meaning he was packing to go, which means he didn't have time to hear that the Beis Din had recanted. So you can't hold. So therefore, you can't blame him for the fact that he didn't hear the change of din. And if he relied on them, then he is patur.
If he went overseas, he's exempt. But said Rebbe Akiva, I agree in this case that he is closer to exemption than an obligation. And Rebbe Azai said to him, "Is in what way is he different from
Oh
one
yeah.
remaining?" I'm sorry.
Sorry, that's right. This is just exactly saying what I said a minute ago. I forgot that it was actually
Okay.
explicit in the Mishnah.
And now I said to him, in what way is he different from one remaining at home? Rabbi Akiva replied, is that it was possible for the one remaining at home to have heard, while this one, it was impossible for him to have heard. If the court ruled to uproot the entire corpus of a law, for example, if they said that there is no meter prohibition in the Torah, for that there is no Shabbos prohibition in the Torah, and for that there is no that there is no idol worship prohibition in the Torah, they are exempt. If they rule to abolish part of a law and to retain part of it, they are liable. How so? If they said that there is a nida prohibition in the Torah, but one who cohabitates with a woman observing one day against another is exempt, or that there is a Sabbath prohibition in the Torah, but one who carries from a private domain to a public domain is exempt, or that there is a prohibition on idol worship in the Torah, but one who vows is exempt, they are liable. And it's as it says, and some matter will be forgotten, some matter, but not the entire corpus.
Right. So when does the Sanhedrin have to bring their korban? Is only if they forgot an aspect of the halacha, not if they removed the entire corpus of the halacha. There, that's just too far gone. Somebody should have noticed, and therefore the responsibility devolves back onto the individuals, not onto the court, because the court is just so obviously wrong.
Okay, I got that. If the court ruled and one of them knew that they had erred, and he said to them, "Yes, you are mistaken," or to the most distinguished member of the court was not there, or if one of them was a convert or a mamzer or a nitzanite or an elder who had never had saw for himself children, they are exempt. For it says here, Edda, and he says further on Edda, just in this case, Edda, which he said further on, they must all be fit to rule. So too, the Edda, which he said here, means that until they are all fit for legal ruling. The court ruled inadvertently and they all acted inadvertently, they bring a bull. If they ruled willfully and the bull acted inadvertently, people the bull. If they ruled willfully and the people acted inadvertently, they must each bring a she lamb or a she goat. If they ruled inadvertently and the people acted willfully, they are exempt.
That can.
All right. Boy, I must be tired because my words are really.
You said you took some medication or something that knocked you.
Yeah, and that just knocked me right out. I knew it would.
Oh,
These
okay,
are not. Excuse me.
carry on, because it was.
Zubas. And these are not entitled to the fine. One who is intimate with a proselyte, one captive, or a slave who was ransomed, converted, or emancipated above the age of 3 years and 1 day. Rabbi Yehuda says a captive who was ransomed is still considered in her state of piety, even if she is of age. If one is intimate with his daughter's daughter, his son's daughter, his wife's daughter, her son's daughter, and her daughter's daughter, they are not entitled to the fine because he is
To
liable
the
to his
knas.
life. All right, to the right, because because he is liable for his life. For his death penalty is in the hands of the court, and anyone who is liable for his life does not pay money. For it is said, if there is no fatal injury, then he shall be punished.
That's
A maiden who is betrothed and then divorced, Roshi the Galil says she is not entitled to the fine. Rebbe Kiva says she is entitled to the fine and her fine belongs to her. The seducer pays on 3 counts and the violator on 4. The seducer pays indemnity for disgrace, impairment, and a fine, and the violator adds thereto as he pays for the pain. What is the difference between the violator and the seducer? The violator pays for the pain, whereas the seducer does not pay for the pain. The violator pays immediately, whereas the seducer pays only when he sends her away. The violator must drink out of his pot, whereas the seducer, if he wants to send her away, he may send her away.
right.
Okay. One more?
No, that's it.
That's it. That's it. That's what I thought. Okay.
Yeah. Okay. Feel good.
Who would like to go back to sleep? Raise your hand.
Uh,
All right.
have a wonderful day. Feel good.
I spoke to my wife yesterday. I told her